I think that some of the best moments in games are the ones that you just stumble across. Things that you didn't expect, yet the world just took a turn and gave you an experience regardless. Because oftentimes, at least for me, I find that the most memorable moments in games don't take place at your destination, but during the journey, when going from point A to point B. And I think that's because the journey has something that the scripted missions lack, the exploration and unpredictability. It's those times where you're on your way to the next mission and you just decide to pop into some random building along the way, and suddenly you're dragged off on another quest or get to witness a funny encounter. It's things like this that make a world, especially an open world, feel alive. But with a lot of games, it comes to a point where the world is so large and barren of life that the journey becomes tedious instead of fun. These days, it seems like every game world has to be bigger than the one before it, and every world has to be more impressive with each game. But it comes to a point where the world is so large that just traveling across it becomes a boring task. The journey to the next mission should feel like part of the gameplay, not like a mind-numbing activity that you just have to push through. So the solution most games use? Fast travel. Fast travel as a mechanic gets a really bad rap, but I think it's one of the most misunderstood mechanics in gaming, because people often blame fast travel itself as being something that ruins immersion and makes players not explore the world that they were cast into. But I'd say that if players are constantly choosing to fast travel and skip the traversal, maybe the traversal itself and the world just isn't interesting enough. And I feel that especially with fast travel being so common now, developers focus less and less on that traveling time in between, figuring that most players will just fast travel anyway. And yes, that is true for part of the player base, those with very limited time or short attention spans who just want to get to the next mission immediately, but we can see proof that if you have a good traversal system and an alive world, a lot of people will choose to take their time exploring and traveling. I feel like a lot of games fall into this trap with open world games, where they make the world so big that it's impossible to actually fill. So what happens is you have this huge open map, but with hardly anything to see or do along your journey, oftentimes with the actual traversal system itself not being that fun either. This turns traveling the map from an experience to dead downtime. Players are experts at optimizing downtime, so when it becomes too much, they'll just fast travel instead. So removing fast travel doesn't really fix the issue with so many games. If anything, it makes the current experience worse. The core issue is the lack of attention the journey itself receives. You can't force exploration and curiosity out of players, you have to earn it from them. If you force them to walk everywhere, all you've done is made a frustrating experience mandatory. So the counter to fast travel comes down to two things. One, an engaging world, and two, a fun traversal system. And a fun traversal system doesn't have to consist of some insane movement abilities. It can be a simple thing like riding on horseback if done correctly, but the less fun the traversal system itself is, the more the world has to weigh up for it, which is important to keep in mind. These two things complement each other, and they can in part weigh up for one another, but it is important to remember that they both have to exist. Truly good open world games understand how important this experience of in-between really is. And that's what makes good open world games not just good games, but truly good open world games. So fast travel becomes a simple solution to a difficult problem, because at the end of the day, fast travel exists to skip something, and if players constantly feel the need to skip traversing the world, then the traversal and content itself just isn't doing enough to justify the existence of the journey. Because given the opportunity, a large portion of players will actively choose the longer but more engaging route. And I think this is the main reason why we remember some worlds so much more vividly than others. What I mean is that the worlds that are the most revered, and also the ones that I personally remember most, are naturally the ones you spend most time traveling across and interacting with. Not just the ones who look the best or are the biggest, but worlds that felt alive and that were fun to just exist in, where moving through them was memorable. The famous ones like The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring all have one thing in common: they're fun to exist in. It feels like a world that you were dropped into instead of a world that was created for you. But for me, the perfect example of a game understanding the journey and really giving it that attention is the Spider-Man game from 2018. This world itself isn't necessarily the best, since the later games expand upon it, but for me it's the most memorable since it was my first experience within this version of New York. This game is the perfect combination of a world that feels truly alive and lived in, while also having a traversal system that is so fun that you actually want to use it as much as you can. I remember even feeling a bit disappointed when I actually reached the next mission, because I was having so much fun just swinging around. So at times I would just swing around the area where the next mission was due to not wanting to stop. The mechanic in and of itself is incredibly fun and satisfying, and it accomplishes what very few games are able to do, which is make traversal a fun experience. It's necessary for games, especially open world games, that you're able to traverse large areas quicker than just walking. That can be by horseback, a vehicle, or a sort of ability that creates a unique way to get around, such as web swinging. And this mechanic is just so much fun. So with this combined with the world itself, where NPCs interact with you and your actions as you go past, seemingly living their own lives, things happen around you on their own. And this is what makes a living world so important for the experience of the journey, because with every rooftop or at the turn of every corner, it has the potential to interrupt your original plan and change the direction of your journey. Maybe you go ahead and decide to stop some random crime, wanna listen in on a conversation that's being had, or you notice an area that you can explore to find some collectible. And because of this, that being the content engagement that the world provides, fast travel becomes kind of redundant. It's not that it doesn't exist, but for a large portion of players, it will always be the second option. Maybe being used on reruns of the game, but generally it takes the backseat on a first playthrough. Having the option there isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad mechanic and it makes reruns faster, alongside helping you get around when you might be really short on time. But in the right circumstances, the alternative of actually going everywhere on your own becomes the more enjoyable option. And I think that's the key difference. In weaker games, traversal feels like something you get through between gameplay, while in great games, it's part of the gameplay. But just because you have a special or unique traversal system, it doesn't mean that it automatically constitutes for a fun experience. Just look at Hogwarts Legacy, for example. This is a great example where the actual way you get around, that being either on broomstick or by a mount, is a really fun and cool way to get around. I really liked just flying around in the beginning, but eventually it started to get really tedious, because the world is just way too large for what content it has in it. So for the majority of the time when you're traveling, nothing is happening. Sure, the world is beautiful, but it doesn't feel alive. It's the same almost everywhere you go, and the world doesn't really give you any reasons to explore or deviate from the fastest, most efficient path. So this means that you as the player will just start fast traveling everywhere. A way to see the stark difference is that in this very same game that has this boring open world, it also has an incredibly interesting and detailed Hogwarts, which is an absolute joy to run around, learning to navigate the place and discovering new little hidden rooms and objects that I've never seen before. It feels rewarding to run between missions within the castle, because it rewards that curiosity in a way that the open world just doesn't. If you decide to run around, you're gonna make new discoveries and find new paths. So ironically, the castle shows that the developers understand how to create a rewarding environment, but were unable to replicate it when it came to the whole world, which most likely comes down to a combination of time and making the world a lot larger than it had to be. A really huge world is not inherently bad, but you need to dedicate an enormous amount of time and effort to it in order for it to work. And that's where most games fail. They're too ambitious without the ability to back it up. A game wanting players to take their time traveling across it isn't a bad thing, but the game does need to respect the player's time. If it's actually filled with content, that's okay, but you can't expect players to spend 5-10 minutes every time going back and forth across a map that's just not fun, where the same thing is happening over and over again. Games need to respect the player's time. What a huge open world that is fun to explore should look like is this. Elden Ring has an amazing and enormous world. In fact, it's larger than most video game worlds. Yet I almost never found myself fast traveling when I have the option to go on foot. Naturally, I fast travel sometimes when getting, for example, from Liurnia to the bottom of Limgrave, where going on foot would just take forever and have me backtracking the same path I already took. And while I enjoy traveling, I don't really want to spend all my time just going back and forth, because obviously I don't have unlimited time. But when exploring Limgrave, for example, I got to a point where I had loads of fast travel locations all over it, but I would still choose to travel on horseback the majority of the time, taking in the world around me and looking for something I missed earlier, just to see if there was something for me to find along the way. There was always something to pull my attention in. I often found myself straying from my path and taking a detour along the way. The traversal system in Elden Ring is incredibly basic, but it works perfectly. You ride around on Torrent. He's a horse that's faster than normal and can jump multiple times in the air, yes, but he's still just a horse, at least for the purpose of traveling. But it works perfectly because of the world around you. This way, the traversal itself is easy and it doesn't distract you from what's around you. It keeps you close to the ground and always scanning around you for things to explore. A traversal system can be interesting through its mechanics, like in Spider-Man, but it doesn't have to be. It can also just complement the world around it. In a game like Elden Ring, you can have some fancy traversal system, sure, but you don't really need it. And with a world so filled with things to do and find, you almost never run out of things to explore. The world keeps interrupting your plans in the best way possible and rewarding that curiosity. I never felt like I was wasting my time when going on foot. Instead, it was some of the most fun I had with the game. And those are mainly the moments I think back on when I think about the game. The gameplay of the in-between. A good world gives you somewhere to go, but it also gives you reasons to take your time getting there. When you travel through a world instead of constantly skipping over it, you start building a mental map of it. You recognize landmarks and are able to navigate on your own without the need of the game's guidance systems. The traversal becomes a core part of the gameplay, and the world stops feeling like just a collection of missions and instead starts feeling like a living world that you just happen to be passing through. So honestly, traversal can be made interesting in several ways, either through the world itself or a very enjoyable traversal system. But in the best games, it's a combination of both.